Go. Call the meeting to order. Roll call. Hayden. Here. Vernon. Here. Sherry.
Here.
Ben.
Here.
Ty. Here. Would everyone stand please for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I get started with the special meeting, Ben, you want to recuse yourself?
Yeah, I will recuse myself from ordinance number 876.
I need a motion to open up the special meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we open up a special meeting, May 10th, 2023.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
The motion is second. Hayden? Aye. Vernon? Aye. Sherry?
Aye.
Ty?
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Ordinance number 876 PRZ 003 22 Pinehurst rezone. Preliminary Development Plan Pinehurst PPDP 003 22.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Yes, this is a rezoning request for a lot located, generally speaking, at 155th and Pinehurst Drive on the south side of Pinehurst Drive, better known as Lot C2 of Pinehurst North Subdivision. The applicant is Mr. Mike Riley, and the request is twofold. The first is for a rezoning request, but there's an accompanying preliminary development plan that comes along with it. The subject property is approximately 3.9 acres in size and is currently vacant ground. The zoning of the property is currently CP2, which is general business zoning. The applicant is requesting the rezoning of the property, again, as I said, stated in conjunction with the preliminary development plan. The request is actually to downzone the property to planned residential with multifamily units. The future land use for this property is designated as high density residential, which would allow for 12 or more dwelling units per acre. The development is for 5 building units. Each unit would provide for 9 dwelling units for a total of 45 units on the site. Each of the buildings would provide for 1 studio apartment, 6 one-bedroom apartments, and 2 two-bedroom apartments. Further, each unit would provide for 11 enclosed attached garages, along with 50 driveway spaces and 16 surface parking stalls along the site. The applicant is requesting the rezoning of the property, as I stated, to the planned residential district, which has stricter requirements than the current zoning district. For instance, the current zoning district would allow buildings to be a total of 60 feet in height. The planned residential zoning district allows for no higher than 50 feet. The apartment homes as proposed are actually 31 feet in height, so they're significantly under that allowed height. The planned residential district also has additional requirements for open space, landscaping, and conformity with the existing neighborhood. Further, the applicant has provided a traffic memo that summarizes the traffic differences between the proposed use and the originally proposed use as a CP2. The original plan allowed for a 2-story office building and a restaurant without drive-through services. However, that building was expected to have fairly high turnover rates. Overall, according to the traffic engineer, there's a significant reduction in anticipated trips per day with the townhome, with the apartment proposal. The expected reduction is 773 vehicles daily. That memo is attached to your report. The development as it has been proposed meets all of the zoning regulations for the PR zoning district, aside from 1 setback regulation. The applicant is requesting allowed reduction to the front yard setback from 35 feet to 25 feet. However, they only need a 7.5-foot reduction. Our code does allow the planning commission to grant an allowed reduction in your setbacks if certain criteria are met. The planning commission did allow that, the reduction from 35 feet to 25 feet. According to the 2040 Base Comprehensive Plan and Master Parks Plan, which was adopted in 2022, high density residential is set aside again for densities of 12 units per acre or higher. And the proposed development comes in just under that. So this is generally in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The City of Baker's active transportation plan has identified this area as a proposed greenway in the general vicinity. The applicant is aware of this requirement and is willing to dedicate land for the future construction of a trail segment if this request is granted. In addition to the previously mentioned front yard setback deviation, the applicant is also requesting a minor deviation from the architectural standards. Again, the code allows for deviations to be granted by either the Planning Commission or the City Council. The request is to allow 4 garage doors on one side of the building. Our code currently states that you can only have 3 garage doors on one side of a building. The applicant is proposing to use multiple door types in order to break up the visual appeal of this, to make it more visually appealing, so that it doesn't appear to be one large, long garage door. Again, our design standards state that the City Council or the Planning Commission may waive or modify any design standard contained in order to encourage the implementation of alternative or innovative practices that implement the intent of the modified standards and provide equivalent public benefits without significant adverse impact on surrounding development. Staff's opinion is that the allowance of this would allow for the indoor garages, which would mimic single family residential, and therefore your staff was supportive of this request, and so was the Planning Commission. So it's kind of one part of it. So that's the preliminary development plan, but along with that is also a request to rezone. As you are all very familiar with, there are factors to be considered when requesting a rezoning, and there are 8 of them, which I will go through briefly. Character of the immediate area, excuse me. 1 second. Sorry. The land surrounding the request varies in nature from commercial to the north, vacant to the east, and R3, which is multifamily, to the west, and residential to the south. The parcels to the north of this property have been fully developed as commercial. There's an abundance of surface parking. There's a bank with drive-through services, and restaurant and retail services. It's worth noting that traditionally multifamily zoning and corresponding uses are oftentimes used to provide as a buffer between commercial and single-family residences. The zoning and uses of nearby property. The property to the north and east of this property, again, are zoned and used as CP2. The property directly to the west is zoned as R3, which is multifamily. It's being built as a memory care facility. And again, the property to the south is zoned as planned residential. The properties to the north, once again, have all been developed as commercial and are again being used as commercial. The suitability of the property for the uses to which it has been restricted. The property again is currently zoned as CP2. The request is to downzone the property from the general business district, which allows a variety of uses, including indoor storage, fast food restaurants, bars, taverns, and many other uses. Those are uses that are allowed by right without additional administrative oversight. Typically, again, it's recommended that a buffer would exist between single-family residential and commercial. The extent to which removal of the present zoning will detrimentally affect nearby property. This rezoning request is unlikely to negatively impact nearby property. The proposed rezoning provides for a needed housing type and provides a buffer between existing businesses and single-family residential. Length of time the property has been zoned is vacant. The property has never been developed. It is currently vacant. Relative gain to the public health, safety, and welfare by the destruction of the value of the petitioner's property as compared to the hardship imposed upon the individual landowners. The proposed rezoning provides again for an improved land use scenario that currently exists. The current zoning allows again for many uses by right and includes uses which are not necessarily compatible with the neighborhood to the south. It is worth noting again that because this is currently zoned as CP2, it is unlikely that that not granting the rezoning request would detrimentally impact the property owner. Staff recommendation, the staff recommended approval of this. The Planning Commission also recommended approval with a 5-2 vote. And conformance to the comprehensive plan. Again, the comprehensive plan calls for this area to be high density residential, which would be multifamily residential. This proposed use is in line with the comprehensive plan. Once again, your staff recommends approval of this, as did the Planning Commission. Council members, you have 3 options before you. The first option is to affirm the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval with a simple majority vote. The second option before you is to override the Planning Commission recommendation of approval with a 2/3 majority vote of the membership of the body, or remand the case back to the planning commission for reconsideration with a statement specifying the basis for the governing body's failure to approve or disapprove. I will answer any questions you may have.
And before you go on, I missed reading the call to public, so I'm gonna go ahead and read that. Public comment will be allowed at the mayor's discretion during special meetings and work sessions. This is exclusive of items requiring a public hearing. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and the total amount of time allowed for public comment for each agenda item is 30 minutes. As a reminder to the public and to city council members alike, the city council and staff will not engage in a dialogue or debate with any speaker pertaining to any comments made. Members of the public wishing to speak must keep their comments germane or relevant to the specific item before the council. Any person who would like to provide public comment on the rezoning matter must wait until the agenda item is up and after the staff has provided presentation. So you will have public comment, but it'll be, right afterwards. So does anybody have any questions for Crystal? Vernon? No? Great.
I know that some of the emails that I've received have asked if these apartments will pay property tax. Could you address if there is property tax collected, please?
Yes, it would be taxed at a residential rate.
Okay.
Yes.
And that would be by the owner of the property, not correct?
Yes, the owner of the property would pay those taxes, yes.
And then also, a couple of the emails had mentioned like 150 parking spaces. Can you confirm what the actual number of parking spaces would be for this proposed project?
Yes, I can. I'm not terribly great at math off the top of my head, so let me look at this plan really quickly because it's right in here. Oh gosh, I need better glasses than this. It is a total of 121 parking stalls, and that is including the garages, the driveways, and the surface parking around the buildings.
Thank you.
You have anything else, Sharon?
I may
Okay,
later, but for right now.
okay.
I am good for right now. I'll reserve the right to speak later.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think now's probably the right time for ex parte notice. So I would like to disclose ex parte communications on this item, including a visit with Katie, Amy, and Doug to see the property for this proposal. I consider that and other emails to be part of my information gathering process and believe that I am still able to consider this project objectively. With that, I do have one question based on the presentation tonight on the comment about Greenway. It doesn't appear there's much space left with the frontage allowance. Is there a proposed location for that Greenway path in the future?
Thank you, Councilmember Maples. That has not been discussed at this time. There would be room on the front of that property or on the rear of that property. It would really be dependent upon where it would best line up with other proposed trail networks. But yes, there would be room.
If no one else has any questions at this point, I'm gonna let Mike talk and then we can ask questions between him and who else, okay? Mike, would you like to speak?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Mike Riley, Riley Development, thank you for your time and thank you for the continuance from last week and to the members or to the public that were here as well. I simply thought it was important to have us full of council to get as much input on this vote as recognizing the importance of it. So that's why I asked for the continuance. So thank you for that. A couple things about the actual project that I just would like to point out, and then I'll make a few comments globally maybe. It has been discussed about the variance, the two variances that we're asking for. I think it's been a little bit convoluted, and I just wanted to clarify. We are asking for a variance along Pinehurst Drive on the depth of the setback on Pinehurst Drive, not on the rear property line backing up to the residential lots. I just wanted to clarify that because I think there was some comments made about buildings on the rear property line next to the residential getting closer and squeezed outside of what is standard in this zoning. So the variance we're asking for is simply a result, if you can see Pinehurst Drive, how it kind of dips in next to building 1. As was mentioned, we need about 7.5 feet on the extreme northeast corner of building 1, which is why we're asking for that variance. That came about as a result of the detention basin that we actually added on the front of this property. We hadn't planned on that, but after doing some stormwater study, we determined that we thought we needed some more detention basin as a result of that, and then taking the access road all the way through. We had originally planned that to be a hammerhead, not go all the way through. So as a result of that, the buildings had to slide slightly to the east, which is what caught that building setback on the front. In terms of the garage doors, these types of buildings are built all over the metro area and growth areas, and most of them do allow for garage doors per one side. Recognizing Baser's code, we did concede to have varying looks of our garage doors to offset the 4 versus 3 code. And finally, the trail mentioned that came up at a later point in time after this was kind of slated. We obviously are in total agreement with the City of Baser's trail program. We want to participate in that. We'll put the trail wherever it makes sense from Baser engineering, Baser staff standpoint, as it ties into other trails. I just wanted to make that that's certainly something that we'll be willing to do as we move forward. And finally, I wanted to commit tonight, as I have in the meetings the 3 meetings I've had with the neighborhood to the south, that as you know, if this were to be approved and as we were to move forward, I'll commit to doing a couple things in regards to the landscape buffer and the area between this project and the residential. And that is meet with them to discuss the landscape buffer, commit to engaging them in what type of landscape plans and berming that they would like to see. And if in fact they want a privacy fence to stretch along that property line, I'll be more than willing to do that. And I will make that part of the commitment tonight on my end. If in fact they want that, we did not put that in the preliminary development plan because I just didn't know if they would want that privacy fence along that entire 594 feet. So as we move this forward, if this were to be moved forward tonight and go to final development plan, we'll have those, I'll make a commitment to have those discussions and engage them over it. Our intent is to do as much tree preservation as possible. And we'll do that with, more precision as opposed to blank cutting and, just clearing right off the bat. Having said that, as you all know, when we develop, many times we have to take out more trees and vegetation than we'd like to accomplish things like utilities and detention basins and all those things. But we plan to do that with more precision as opposed to just blank cutting. So those are my comments really in regards to the actual plan. I thought I would make a few comments globally about perhaps this lot in Pinehurst in general and why. I understand growth is hard. It's super hard and change is hard. And everyone has a different opinion about what the right growth for the city is. And conversations could be had for hours about that. So we're not going to do that. However, from the time that our company came to the Baser market about 4 to 5 years ago to start developing residentially and commercially, comments have been made to me across the board from city officials, city staff, the public in general, and the comments are, Mike, we need grocery in Baser. We need more sit-down restaurants in Baser. We need more services in Baser. And I agree with all that. People don't want to continue to have to drive to the Legends, have to drive to Bonner Springs, have to drive to Lansing to get those services. And so as I look around, my question is, and why I bring that up, is where do we think people that will work at grocery stores, where will they live in the city of Baser? Where will people that work in restaurants, managers, hostesses, waitresses, where will they be able to live in the city of Baser? When more services come to a city, more different housing styles need to be provided. Does Baser have, or is Baser providing that housing style that works for a mix of residents that are going to work in those service industries, that are going to teach in your schools, that are going to put the police uniform on and the fire uniform on every day? Is housing being provided for people in your community that work in service jobs? I believe the answer to that right now is clearly no. A new home in Baser is over $400,000. The average home in Baser is nearing $300,000 from a resale standpoint. A year ago, rates were 3. Today, rates are closer to 8. That is a substantial jump and a real impact to people in the service industry. So my question is, if you agree, and I'm not saying you do, or if anyone does, but if you agree that you want those services in your community and you need those services to help facilitate growth, and with those services, you need housing for those people to work in those industries, then the question becomes, why build multifamily here? Why this location? Why not apartments and renters? Why not put them on the outskirts of the city, as has been discussed? Why not put them where no one else is? And my answer to that question has 2 parts. And it's really more of a personal opinion from Mike Riley standing here as a person. Quite frankly, I believe it's a better use of this site and more consistent with what's happening on the lots just to our west to rezone this as multifamily. Pinehurst was developed over 17 years ago. That's 17 years of no action, no buyer, no development, no benefit to the city or the school district. I believe that if Pinehurst were to be designed today as a community, it wouldn't be designed with zoning going directly from commercial CP2 to residential. That jump is typically far too aggressive by today's standards. I believe the buffered approach to zoning today would go from commercial CP2 to multifamily, a less intense zoning, to residential. Very similar to what you have done along Pinehurst Drive with the memory care and the assisted living facility. So my answer to the first question is, I simply believe it's a better use of this site. I think it's a better use for the city, and I think it's a better use for the neighbors. I won't speak for that, but that's just Mike Riley talking about. When you think about multifamily, being connected to the city, being able to provide a walkable community, being closer to services and jobs and schools is critically important. So the idea of putting multifamily out on the outskirts of the city, quite frankly, doesn't make much sense. My second answer as to why here is maybe a little more personal still. If I lived in Pinehurst today, I'll be honest with you, the idea of CP2 zoning, my house, my neighborhood, my cul-de-sac backing up to CP2 zoning would scare me to death. There are over 120 permitted uses in CP2 zoning in the Baser zoning regulations today. Over 120 approved permitted uses. That doesn't account permitted with conditions or conditional use opportunities. There are over 120 permitted uses that are already zoned. So a buyer can walk in, adhere to the Baser development plan, get a building permit, and start building. No discussion to neighbors, no public hearing, no conversation about berms, landscape buffers, or fences. Simply adhere to Baser regulations, get a building permit, and go. Now, in those 120 permitted uses, there are some very mundane permitted uses, things that have been discussed by some of the neighbors: office buildings, dental office, medical office. The neighbors think that would be appropriate and possibly what they would want to see. But also inside that permitted uses, those 120, are things like car washes with vacuums that run all hours of the day, convenience stores with pumps of over 4, hotels that can go up to 5 stories, restaurants with drive-throughs, and taverns. Now, I will firmly admit, all of those are probably on the very extreme. I don't think if the lot stays commercial, you're going to see a C-store on this particular location. But I also doubt that you're going to see a small 1-story medical office building with 5 to 10 cars a day that the neighbors think they'd want in their backyard. More than likely, it will be somewhere in between. It will be somewhere of those other 120 uses. It will be something with traffic. It will be something with noise. It will be something with delivery trucks. It will be something with issues to it. And the potential of the unknown, if I lived in Pinehurst, would scare the heck out of me. And here's the deal. Those 120 uses can go without much discussion. I had the question asked to me last week during intermission from one of the neighbors, would I want Edgewood in my backyard? And my answer to that person was absolutely. If the option was Edgewood versus the unknown of CP2 zoning and what could go behind me, no question, I want Edgewood. Perhaps it's the devil that I know versus the devil that I don't know. But what I know, what I do know tonight is that this lot is not going to see 17 years of being vacant going forward. There is going to be something that goes here. And I've talked to the neighbors 3 different times. I don't want this to be an adversarial relationship. We certainly might have differences of opinions, and I'm totally cool with that. But what I do know is as CP2, there are a lot of things that can go on this. And Baser is getting a lot of eyes on it. So it's going to be something. And so when I think about if I lived there, the unknown of that would scare me. I'll end with this. I had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to tour a new multifamily apartment complex in an area of Old Shawnee, an area that you wouldn't think a new apartment complex would be. A friend of mine is the developer, and I asked him as he toured me around, I said, what are your demographics? Who are the people that are renting your units? His answer to me was, Mike, we have no demographics in multifamily. We have young people and we have senior age people. We have people renting by choice and we have people renting by necessity. We have young couples saving up for a home to buy. And we have people that have sold their large house that are now renting because they don't want to leave the area. We have singles and we have small families. What I took from that conversation was that there are no demographics in multifamily. They are just simply people renting. They're just people. And I think building out Edgewood would provide a nice opportunity for those people to live in Baser and rent a Class A apartment in the right location. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now or later. Thank you for your time.
Hey, any questions from Mike?
Yeah, I do have one based on, I think, a comment last week or in a previous meeting, I guess, the planning commission probably on a proposed price point. And I was curious because there's been some concerns, again, trying to balance affordability versus the concern of who might move in. So do you have, what is your thought on that price point? And is that fixed or likely to move?
Great question, Commissioner. So when I look at the market study that we did is probably over 6 to 8 months old. At that point in time, I will tell you over that period of time, rents have substantially changed, not only, probably for single family homes, but definitely in the multifamily market. For instance, this project that I toured in Shawnee estimated rents at $130 a foot. It's coming out at $192 a foot. This project, I anticipate being somewhere in that $130 to $140 to possibly $145 a foot. When you look at the average size apartment, right, being just about 1,000 square feet or over, you're looking at, $1,400, $1,500, $1,300, $1,100, $1,000 for possibly a single apartment with a single garage. The garages are definitely attractive point to this. Not only from a design standpoint, you don't have a mass sea of open parking, right? It feels more like a condo than it does an apartment complex because of the garages, but it's certainly a benefit as well to people who live there. So you know, when you look at the overall picture, I think you're going to see rents from $1,000 to $1,500, depending on the type of unit that's selected.
Thank you.
Are you good, anything?
No, I do not at this time.
Sherry,
Not right now.
Vernon?
No, I'm good.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
So Crystal, are you done with your presentation? Okay. Open it up to the call of the public then. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Chester Wilson. I live at 817 155th Terrace. And the HOA president for Pinehurst Estates, of which several of our residents back up to that. We took a petition, and the last I saw the numbers on the petition, I think we were at 82, 83 that were opposing to it. And one of the things in terms of negative effects was infrastructure, support from the police department, infrastructure on the road being able to handle the traffic. Not sure if the study is really valid because it's from predetermined tables. I don't ever remember seeing any lines out there that actually measured something in terms of the traffic. So you could have a garbage in, garbage out study on that. And I think if you have possibility of 135 people living in that area, then it's going to be much higher than you think. Certainly with the infrastructure is, you know, can the schools handle this kind of an uptick right away? And that's a problem no matter where you put apartments versus here. One thing is kind of the bait and switch thing. We had talked to Mike earlier, and this was the first meeting, and saying, yeah, residential would be good. But what we were thinking were one-story villas. And I think along that line, if you were to approve that kind of a zoning, maybe that would be something that would be more in line with people that would be coming to live with and support or visit their people that were in the care facilities, the nursing home, and the cognitive care facility. And we think that that would be preferable than people 2 stories above you. Certainly, this is better than a lot of those CP2 commercial zones, but you know, does the city council have the power to control what gets in there? I'd find it hard to believe that you would just let anything be built in there that you know might be detrimental on a CP2. The other thing is, one of the previous meetings, I think it was the 3rd meeting, I missed the 2nd meeting. Mike Riley had showed us pretty fantastic architectural structure that he said, well, that's 2 feet too high, and you guys won't let me build something 2 feet too high. I just find that hard to believe when we just got done building a pet center where a ton of variances were allowed on that and not met. So I think you could have that better architecture structure if you wound up approving this for one that looked more like the houses that it's bumping right up against. And Mike knows that property. I could probably send you pictures of it if you haven't received them from anybody else, what those look like. And the other thing is we know that there's some Section 8 possibility materials being purchased. So then what's the possibility of this becoming Section 8 housing and all low-rent housing? So that would be a problem as well.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Next. Yes, sir.
My name is Gib Buckingham. I live at 15423 Crimson Street. I moved from Johnson County. I lived over there, 15, 20 years. Believe me, living in Olathe and watching it grow, and I kept moving out to get away from traffic, to get away from the craziness. And I found a real nice spot here in Baser, which I live right off the trail. Okay. And I enjoy it thoroughly. This has been a great situation for my wife and I. Prior to that, years ago, there was discussion about putting in some apartments there. And being a salesman that I am, I went to every door, and this prior to new development at Pinehurst Estates, which we're happy to have, by the way. But I was able to capture door to door, 109 signatures. A lot of work. Yeah, I know that was back a long time ago. I didn't see a lot of people wanting to do too much to kind of avoid having something of that nature. That again was some apartment complexes that were to go in. So what I'd like to do is just leave it. I mean, there's a lot of folks here that back then, you know, you talk about restaurants and all this, you know, it isn't an issue to go 4 or 5 miles, to tell you the truth. But I think keeping this small community friendly, you know, your neighbors, you wave. I mean, I can't say enough good things about living here. And I want that to continue, and I'm not looking to put somebody out on the street or make it hard for them to live, but I just feel to be a better solution to see our city grow at a little bit slower pace, but it's already taken off. We all know that. But I like to leave this with you because I made a lot of efforts back then. And you can see everybody was non-rejectable signing this waiver. So we'll leave that with you if you'd like to look it over. Basically, we'll find first.
Thanks, sir.
And see you later.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Hi, my name is Brad Stitz and I live at 821 Evergreen Street. I'd like to say that apartments have been turned down twice previously, and they had a street barrier between them and the houses. And this will have no barrier. Basically, I mean, you can plant some trees, but a 2-story building, you know, it's not going to cover that. And if you want to rezone this, his original plan, the only one that got support from the neighbors were retirement villas, 1 story. That was the original presentation to us, and they continue to change now. So I'm not even sold that he wouldn't get other variances or something on this to change it, because everything we've seen, and even what he presented to you, isn't what we saw the most recent. So it just keeps changing. And yes, the houses here are expensive, but do you see any of them setting? They don't last, so they're selling. People want to be here as is. We don't mind driving. That's why we moved here, because we like to be away from the hustle and the bustle. It's nice here, and the throwing up apartments, the schools are already overcrowded. Going to have to do something about that, and this just worsens that. And the only person that I have heard speak that was not opposed to these apartments is about a 1/4 mile south of where the proposed is, and he's just put his house on the market. So I don't know what there is with that, but he must be a little opposed to it. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I came out of the yard to be here. That's how important this is to me. My name is Patty Van Hara. I live at 724 155th Terrace. Lived here 3 years. I'm an accountant, been one for over 40 years. So I think about taxes, and businesses bring in taxes. And I came out here, like I said, I've lived here 3 years. And I came out here hoping there's little shops right there, maybe a coffee shop, a restaurant, who pays taxes. Apartments don't house people that open up businesses. I have a over $500,000 home that I'm hoping I retire in a few years, has some value should I have to leave because I'm being taxed out of the city. I know we've got a tax coming up of 1% on sales tax. Get some businesses in there to pay that. Schools are growing. I have neighbors around me that have children. I don't get involved in everything. I hear things. Where are we going to put these kids? We're going to build another school. That means more taxes. How are we going to keep affording this? Growth is good, but it needs to be properly zoned. Shawnee is where those apartments are at, okay, not in by $500,000, $750,000 homes. And that needs to be thought about business wise and wanting more people to come into this community. So you're kind of messing with us when you put these apartments in because that's our resale value on our homes. And for a lot of us, it's our savings. Not all of our savings, but a lot of it for when we decide to move into an apartment and rent or move into a condo or somewhere else, senior living. I know people that rent apartments, 16 to 1800 or luxury apartments. And I know that's a little more in town. They can go over 2000. So when you're telling me 1000 to 1500, I calculate that up. And Section 8, that's just not good to put next to beautiful homes to zone them properly. I want people to come to Basehor. I want businesses to come here, but I want it properly zoned, not like it is just, I feel like it's willy-nilly. And I lived in a community outside of Blue Springs for many, many years, and they were improperly zoning it. And it was really, it didn't grow because of that. Let's see if there's anything else. I don't think so. I've missed out a little bit on the conversation. This was zoned one way and it's been changed. And that frightens me. And I think it would frighten anyone coming into this community to build or buy, because are you going to change the zoning on them and the same thing will happen to us. So anyways, that's my opinion. I haven't lived here forever. I've listened to a lot of conversations from a lot of people that have. Growth is hard, and it's interesting to listen to the people that don't want it to change and people that want it to change. But it has to change properly. And you don't, in my opinion, put apartments next to $500,000, $750,000 homes. And that's what we have over here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Maddie, are we keeping time? Okay, thanks.
Good evening. I'm Amy Myers. I live at 827 155th Circle. It's not that I don't feel that apartments should be in Basehor. It's just that I feel they should not be in the backyard of single-family homes. When I purchased my home in 2015, I was aware that it was commercial property and had the potential at some point of being developed commercially. I was fine with that. However, had I known that it would be rezoned to multifamily apartments in my backyard where my children are growing and being raised, is not something that I would have agreed to. From a business retention perspective, having business retail that is collecting sales taxes would be much more beneficial to the city versus a multifamily apartment whose tenants would not be paying the property taxes. How will the city budget additional resources such as public safety and support for our increasing education system without increasing taxes? Retail businesses help absorb those taxes, which in turn is a benefit to the residents' taxes. I would like to see a traffic study from the last 6 months, not something that was compared to in 2006 with the potential of what could have been on that property. I'm curious to know that when Mike Riley would have met with the school board to talk about this potential complex. I do work in the school district, and our already crowded schools are continuing to grow at the 6% growth rate each year. There are many other commercial property options that could be at this location. I, for example, would love to see any type of commercial property that my family could walk to utilize, such as any of a green space with multi-businesses around it, a gym, an attorney's office, any type of real estate office, florist, even a grocery store, or an indoor climate controlled storage unit would be great too. Please reconsider this location for apartments. There are much more better suited locations in Basehor for growing multifamily areas, not in the backyard of families' homes. And you will see the house that is closest to the property on the far side of the display. I am on the other side. And so that is where all of our children play, my neighbor's kids, and it is right on top of this property. Thank you, City Council. I appreciate your time.
Next.
This is my house, right? This is where this is literally very near your park.
So Mayor Drennan, I'm Katie McSweeney, and we're at 831 155th Circle. Mayor Drennan and City Council members, thank you for taking the time to hear our concerns, and we sincerely hope you take them to heart. Thank you for reading all of our emails, and for those of you who took time to speak with me personally. We also hope that you've read all the emails and viewed the 80+ signatures that we've sent that support the opposition to this proposal. After listening to some of the current City Council members, we respect the desire to add additional multifamily housing to Basehor, but it does not belong in any citizen's backyard. So we speak for ourselves, but also for other neighborhoods here in Basehor. We would strongly support them as well. There are many other areas in Basehor that could accommodate an apartment complex while respecting the homes and needs of all of your current constituents. These other areas are open lots that are able to be connected to the future Metro Green Trail, which is not our neighborhood, within walking distance of the zoned elementary school, which would not be ours, with Glenwood Ridge. Early Childhood Center, New City Park, New City Center, restaurants on the north side of State Avenue, the library, just to name a few. One of the open lots we've directed your attention to in my email on the north side of State Avenue is a 12-acre lot, not 3.9 acres as the lot in question, right on the north side of State Avenue owned by Mr. Riley himself. If the goal of adding multifamily housing is in Basehor to accommodate young families, singles, and professionals, then we should set this project up to thrive with the amenities it deserves and the respect of the current citizens here in Basehor. This area behind our homes is not that area. This is not the first and absolutely will not be the last developer to present a multifamily housing development for you to take to heart. There have been two other proposals, one behind Prairie Lakes neighborhood and the other just south of the pharmacy near our homes in the past 2 years alone. We ask that you please consider where the best fit would be for both your current constituents and the future residents of that said apartment complex. Please, we ask you to wait for the best proposal to enhance our community. I've heard this many times in the meetings that we've been in here in the past, that what are we really voting on today? Tonight, the vote is not whether or not Basehor wants or needs apartment, multifamily type housing. But the question is this lot the best fit for the community and your community members? And we firmly believe it's not. Lastly, what a beautiful community Basehor is. It's not just a city, but it's a community. I've had the pleasure of going door to door and speaking with countless residents in both our neighborhood and surrounding areas about this project. They've all been warm, welcoming, and understanding to our thoughts as homeowners. I say this as my last point. We elect our city council members and our mayor to be our voice in these city issues. We ask you to please represent us, your constituents, tonight with this decision. We are your neighbors, we're the staff members in the schools, we're fellow parents living here in
Your time is up.
We love it. Thank you.
Thanks. Next. Kathy, is it possible you get a 1 minute warning? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave Lockridge. My wife Suzanne and I live at 823 and 155th Circle, right next to Katie and Amy. So right behind where the proposal is going. I too from Olathe and grew up in that area and watched as that city grew and expanded time after time in what appeared to be growing for growth's sake. That's something that I hope Basehor is not, or can avoid the same mistakes and pitfalls that I grew up watching in Olathe. I take exception to the thought or the comments that as homeowners, we knew what we were getting into when we purchased these homes. When I purchased my home just 2 years ago, I understood it to be a commercial zoning, CP2, not residential, where we could put an apartment complex in. That same sentiment that we've heard time and time again, we heard from the chairman of the planning commission after the public comments during that session. I thought that was a little disheartening to say those comments without the chance for us to reply. Growth and change are hard. I agree with that. I agree with it with one caveat. Growing for the right reasons, growing for the benefit of the community, benefit of residents of Basehor who've chosen to be here. I think that can be hard. Growth just for personal gain and profit, I don't think that's hard at all, right? I just think it's short-sighted, it can be uncaring. So I ask you guys to keep that in mind, the commission, when you're voting and represent us.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Mayor, members of the city council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'll try to keep it brief, not babble like I did the last time. My name is Doug Albertson. My wife Amy's there. Our little neighborhood circle here. I live at 835 155th Circle. And I've lived there since 2016. So we're like in the first 10 homes or so. Now it's like, there's like 2 homes getting built right now and then it's full. But anyway, I attended all 3 meetings Mr. Riley hosted. And he didn't have to host anything. I acknowledge that fact. But that in that he brought us into the circle and the decision maker, well, not the decision matrix, but he asked for our input. At the first meeting, the overview that my general feeling was of it is we agreed that multi-story was out of the picture. And he said he didn't want to pursue anything that would get pushback, generate pushback. And since then, it's just morphed over time, and that's what I don't like. Is personally, I mean, tell me what's gonna happen. All right, and be upfront with me, and I can either support or obviously push back now. Some of the things that came up in the planning council meeting. The variance went from 35 to 25 feet in the front. That was, pretty much accepted. But a 2-foot variance to put in the better looking apartments, not even tabled. Even in our latest meeting, in between the second and the third meeting, Mr. Riley met with the city.
1 minute remaining.
And basically submitted, and what's in the submission is worst case of the 2 apartments that he proposed to. So on one hand, he's showing us all these nice pictures. I don't know if you saw my email. But I provided an overview online of all the meetings that we had with Mr. Riley. And that's pretty much it. Very forward. Let's get by that. And I don't know what else to say other than, the apartments, yeah, they're gonna be right in my backyard if you agree to side with if you decide that. But, they're gonna be completely isolated from any of the developing green spaces and all that. It's like an island over there. That 2440 is a great, not a great, it is a huge divider.
Your time is up.
Thank you. Anybody else?
There's a
Good evening. My name is Angela Evers Jones, and I proudly live in Pinehurst Estates at 815 155th Circle. As I've told these guys when we've talked about it, my neighbors, my husband and I looked at these various homes in Baser, in Lansing. Just trying to find somewhere that we can live and retire, which is right around the corner, and feel safe at. We decided moving to Baser after looking at Pinehurst Estates after looking for 2 years. Decided that this was a safe place and a place that we could retire and be comfortable in. And we looked at the neighborhood for 2 years. People in our neighborhood knew my husband and our vehicle before we actually even moved there, simply because we watched the area. We wanted to move in a place that we could be proud of, where people maintain their homes and they have respect for their areas and a love for the neighborhood. And that's how, after moving there, we felt. I just feel like putting apartments in, it's bad enough with we have a tavern across the street that's north of us that we can hear at night when you're outside trying to enjoy your evening. Putting apartments in there, I don't know which one is worse. You having the individuals come and go, and those with apartments is never consistent. You have people that are moving in and out. Whereas in residential homes, that's who's going to be there, whether you know their names or whatever, you see their faces, you can speak or not speak, whatever. The one thing I do like about our neighborhood is the fact that when you come into our neighborhood.
1 minute remaining.
That people love their homes and everything. When I look at Facebook, when I look at Baser's website, the first thing I seen on there was the fact that Basehor is known for its beautiful residential homes. So I want to ask you guys, why would you put apartment buildings near beautiful residential homes? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Mayor.
Two people.
Yep. Mayor, if I might, thank you, sir. We have two folks that are available online that have put their name in the chat that are available to speak if you would like to allow them the opportunity to do so.
Go ahead.
Michael Bayer, and I apologize, sir, if I pronounced your last name wrong. If you could please unmute and you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael Bauer. I'm a resident of Pinehurst South, 607 154th Place. I am the original resident of this entire area. Moved in here 17 years ago, going on 18 years ago now. I've watched the development grow. One of our biggest problems, and even the state has been involved in redirecting traffic on 24 highway. You increase the traffic in this area, you're going to have a problem getting people just across the highway to turn into it. The stoplight is non-functional, and the speed going down 2460 is entirely too high. If we're going to be a community and start bringing more traffic, we need to reduce the speed limit going through the city of Basehor. That's the first thing. The second thing is the tax issue. We're going to increase, as people have spoke, the apartments are not going to really increase our tax basis. The property taxes and taxes in Basehor are getting so high, they're getting to a point where they're going to start running people out of this area. You have a lot of retired people that are in the area. They cannot afford these taxes to increase, and they're going to increase because we're going to need more schools if we just bring in apartments and things like this. The third thing I have is I don't see an elevation drawing on any elevation between the two properties on the backside there. And I just wondered what they were planning on for the berm there and how high it would be and what kind of barrier. I don't think a fence would be appropriate, at least not one made of wood. The area in most cases requires wrought iron, aluminum type fencing in the entire area as far as codes go. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. You go on to the next one.
Andrea Cheatham, if you would like to unmute, you will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrea Cheatham. Thank you for your time. I live at 800 South 155th Terrace. We also researched the area, came over from the Piper side to Basehor because we like the family environment and the quality of home. We also were so excited that the neighbors also knew me and my children in my car prior to us even moving in. We were so excited about the build. With that being said, the traffic report kind of concerns me because I come home from work every day and I am in line already at the stoplight turning from State Avenue on to 155th, and I'm waiting 3 lights just to get through that stoplight to come home with that long light waiting for a turn. Also, the homes in this area are of highest quality, and I mean, they're right, 500,000 to 7, we even have a $1,200,000 home going down the street. I don't think this is the appropriate area to put the apartment. It will, I believe it will kill our value of our homes in this area that we all are so proud of and looking forward to be part of our retirement income. I do see a sign from Speedway on the north side of State Avenue where they are proposing to build multi-family housing. I think that would be a great location for it. I mean, I'm not on the commission, but to put them in the backyard of our homeowners in this area whose homes are worth so much, I think would not be beneficial to a Basehor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. That's it. Okay. I'm going to open it up for discussion with the council now. Anybody have any questions? Vernon?
Got one. I heard about a petition being signed. And the petition had 82, 83 signatures on it.
Yes.
Okay. And this was an opposing this?
Opposing this.
Was there anybody that refused to sign the petition?
I have one person who refused to sign, they just wanted to find out more information. So I know some people got a few extra signatures later, and I don't know where those are. And Josh, Johnson, who the man Brad was referring to, was the only other one that was in favor of this. And now he's selling his house and moving out of the neighborhood.
I took the other, I think I had maybe 20 signatures, and I emailed with a copy of checks, copies of mine. I didn't have anyone refuse. And I went over to the ball, I went all over, it was a lot of people. I was honestly really surprised, but I think one of the biggest concern were people were asking about schools. Just a lot of people, so I had my kids with me when I was doing a lot of this, and I just kind of shared with them some of my concerns, but I didn't have anyone refuse to sign.
Three of the people that signed it had expressed where they came from, Piper. I think it was Olathe and Overland Park. They lived in housing areas where apartments were built near their housing, not even this close, but like maybe across the north side of the street, and their crime shot up like that. And that was why they left. I really fear for this, that this is starting out in the low thousands range and it teetering around there. You're not gonna have people that want to take care of things and value the preciousness of others around them and taking care of their property. It just, and then one of the ladies that did sign, she was on the Overland Park City Commission. And she said, we dealt with this kind of thing all the time. I could probably go back and look her up if you wanted to talk to her.
No.
I was just. She said that this is a very bad thing.
I was just curious that everyone that signed a petition that said no, that there wasn't anybody that agreed that maybe this might be a good thing.
Just one.
Okay, just one. The second point that I want to talk a little bit about is someone made a comment about driving 4 to 5 miles is not a problem. Somebody. Okay, so that's not a problem for people to have vehicles. The reason I bring that up is that 23 years ago, when I moved here, that was one of the biggest issues for the citizens, was that they had to drive so far to get services. So just kind of going back and looking at those notes. I know that property very well. In fact, I go to church over there. And when we bought that 10 acres, I can look out and I can see that there wasn't anything there. And I oftentimes would tell people, before your house was there, there was nothing there. And we just need to make sure that part of the balance is, as Mr. Riley had said, talks about services coming in. So I've seen this community grow a whole lot over 23 years to see that we are getting in services. We are getting in food places. We're getting those places in. I remember when Casey's used to be right there. So the city is growing, and as people move, you find that it is a challenge to deal with growth and change. And I'm gonna save my Port Authority comments for later. Sherry?
Well, first off, I want to tell everyone thank you for your emails and phone calls. And I've tried to respond back to everybody. If I missed someone, I apologize. Because I did actually read them all very thoroughly. The other thing I appreciated was for people that want commercial, that you actually took the time to tell me what commercial you wanted. And I'm actually going to make a list of those. So I'm actually going to go back through all those emails and make that list. I'm also on the Leavenworth County Economic Development Board, and I work with Mr. Tom Cole, and I plan to share that information with him. because the citizens have spoken and they've told me what they want. And I've listened. I also want to ask the question of Crystal, please. So if this would happen to remain commercial, and I'm going to pick a place that I'd like to see in Baser, so I'm going to pick Caribou Coffee because I love the way the building looks. I think it's lovely, and they usually have a really nice outdoor patio with a little fire pit. And I just think in the fall that would be awesome. So let's say they chose to go in as a commercial building that's already zoned commercial. And what would be that process as far as, does it ever come to city council if they meet criteria? I just think maybe it would help everyone to maybe hear that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Councilmember Standiford. That's a great question. So yes, for a business like that, you're correct that would be an allowed use, would be a permitted use. They would still have to go through the permitting process, of course. And with that, they would have to submit a site plan that would detail their storage, or sorry, not their storage, their stormwater drainage, their traffic patterns and such. And generally speaking, all of that would be reviewed at the staff level. Our current code, though, does require site plans to go to the planning commission for the planning commission to review.
Okay.
However, if it is found that the proposal meets all of the requirements of the city, then that proposal should be approved. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And then for right now, one last comment for Mr. Riley. I do want to say that I do thank you for the developments and the contributions that you've made to the city of Baser. We do appreciate that you've taken the time to build in our community. And also I do agree with the comments that you had made regarding need for a variety of housing in Baser, especially when it comes to needing those individuals that would work, say, in a grocery store or different businesses. So I just wanted to thank you also.
I'm just gonna follow up on some of the same comments. I am a believer that the town does need some multifamily availability somewhere in this town. Several of our teachers, if not most of them, cannot currently afford to live in the city of Baser. My wife's in the school district, and I'll look it up. I think somebody said they couldn't hear me, so I apologize. And you're right, this is the third time in 3 years we've had this conversation with different neighborhoods. So we are getting very good at understanding the discomfort people have with it being near their neighborhoods. I don't know how strong, how many places there truly are to try to put these. I think this is one of the more well thought out designed plans of the ones that we have seen. They're not 3 or 4 stories, they're a little bit further away. In addition to your, I don't know if I like scooters better than, what did you say, Caribou?
Oh, Caribou, yeah.
Scooters is my favorite.
Okay.
But it also allows for tattoo parlors, hotels, taverns, bars. You go through the exact same process. I'm glad Taco Bell is on the other side of the street instead of 24/7 drive-through next to your back door. So the idea of a little lower density and a little less traffic has some positives to it. Not saying favor or not favor, just saying there are some positives of a little lower density tract than some of the commercial properties that would be eligible without much say to the city council side. I do appreciate also everything you've done within the city. I have read all the emails. I don't respond to all the emails the way some of them do, but I do read every one of them, so I appreciate them also.
I'll start with that same comment that I did read and certainly appreciate all the emails. I don't respond, again, trying to avoid some of the concerns on ex parte communications. So I want to follow up, Crystal, on some of the same question. Caribou scooters, I could go either way, but to confirm that process would be the same for any of the permitted uses. I think that original site plan that had this lot as a commercial or a small business and a restaurant, the next lot over is a hotel. And so if something like that were to be proposed, as long as it meets all the requirements, it would be, you said should approve, but shall, if it meets all the requirements, correct?
Correct.
And then what kind of scope, there are some concerns, what kind of scope of changes are allowed between this proposal and what would be built if it's approved? And what are the enforcement mechanisms for that?
Thank you. That's a great question. Yes, so our code does allow for minor deviations to be reviewed by staff. Some of those things include placement of buildings. They can't deviate more than 5% from the placement or from the size. There's a long list, Councilmember Maples, and I don't have them all memorized, but there is a list of criteria that staff can administratively approve. They're pretty minor. While there are several of them, they are fairly minor. Like I said, 5% deviation. That's not much, right? Beyond that, if staff is unable to approve that request, then it would actually go to the Planning Commission. We very recently did that. And then it's up to the Planning Commission to review the request and see if it's substantially in compliance with what was originally proposed and approved. If the Planning Commission determines that it is not substantially in compliance, then the applicant has to go back through the process and bring forward a new preliminary development plan and go back through everything.
Okay, and I know one concern specifically that was mentioned is increasing the height. So the height allowance is, I think you said 50 feet earlier, somebody said 50 feet. So 2 feet taller than what is shown would be allowable if that's something that makes sense from the development standpoint.
Yes, I haven't seen those other drawings. I haven't reviewed those, but yes, what is being proposed is 31 feet and 50 feet is the limit. So assuming that it's a 2-foot deviation, then that would, yes, be allowed.
And then has this zoning changed in the past that you're aware of?
Not in the recent past. No, not the zoning.
Okay, and I know future land use map may have been one factor that was recently approved.
Yes, the future land use map did change. However, the actual zoning has not changed.
So Sherry had asked some good questions earlier that confirmed a couple pieces, and I want to make sure we touch on some of those concerns as well. That there would be property taxes with this. No abatement was requested. Only 10 of the 45 units are 2-bedroom, which should minimize the number of school-age children. Obviously, anybody can move in any of those locations and have kids in any number of apartments, but I think that helps a little bit. The expected trip generation is less than some of the commercial uses, and that is acknowledged expected, not based on trip counts, which are not required. I know there's a lot of traffic in that area, so certainly understand that concern. And then emergency services were contacted for one of the other recent projects. It's been discussed and they felt comfortable with the service level. So that is certainly a concern for me, but I feel like that has been at least discussed. I appreciate the comment about the fence or berm and landscaping option. And I was actually curious if, not knowing what everyone's current thought is, but if we would be comfortable adding, if we were to approve, adding that as a stipulation to have that conversation. I don't know if the verbal commitment is enough, if that's sufficient, or if we make that part of the approval process.
So point of clarification. We either approve or we send it back. He's asking for something to be added. That would mean sending it back. No?
The city council could choose to uphold or affirm the vote of the planning commission, and you have the prerogative to add additional stipulations should you choose to do so.
Okay.
And that would not require a remand back to the planning commission for consideration.
And again, maybe commitment is sufficient, and I'm good with that, not knowing coming in that was going to be said. So I'm comfortable with that. But I think for me, the security concern is one of the last lingering, and having that some sort of physical barrier would help. And then I don't know if there's a way to do this, but to prevent the metro or prevent any trail in that back portion of the lot as well would certainly be a concern to me. So whether that's at the front lot or somehow connects to the parking lot sidewalk network, I would feel much more comfortable with that.
Ask a quick question. When you guys decide on, they said anybody can put in a permit to build whatever they want to here. When you guys make these decisions as to when someone give you a permit and say, I want to build this here, do you guys really consider or look at it, do you look at this, okay, that's money right there, or do you actually look at the fact that these are homes, these are residential homes, nice homes here, we're not gonna let you, we're gonna turn down everything.
I think that should go to Crystal because these don't come to city council. That's one of the things we were just clarifying with her a moment ago.
Thank you.
Sorry, yes, I will answer that question if the council would like me to answer that question.
Yes.
Yes. From a staff perspective, we are checking to make sure that it meets all of the zoning regulations. It's really irregardless of what the use is, what type of taxes it may bring in. We're looking at things like setback and stormwater, traffic movement, architectural design standards. Those are the items that we are reviewing.
Any more questions from anybody?
Well, one other comment that considerations for walkability. I talked to Leslie and I think it'd be good if we have staff look into whether that would be a crosswalk or some other pedestrian friendly infrastructure to cross that street to the commercial that is in that area to allow that to be more accessible.
So you're talking like the strip area by
Right, to cross
by the
Pinehurst.
little donut store and,
Mhm.
okay.
You have anything else? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted you to circle back. We talked about the Port Authority. I was first appointed to the Port Authority by the county commissioners to specifically look at and evaluate land for commercial use based on economic development. Then the mayor and the city administrator appointed me as the Basil representative, again, for the Port Authority for commercial property based on economic development. I bring that up to say this. You can't have it both ways. You can't pick and choose what's gonna go in there. And that's Mike's point. You don't know what's gonna go in there. If the vote goes to commercial, you don't know what's gonna go in there and you can't come back. Well, you can come back, but and point in case is I was involved with a big project out in Tonganoxie, something with chicken. And again, it was economic development thing. Community said, no, no, no. And it was, property didn't change. It still stayed what it was. Now we have another company that's going in there and to see how they do. To Mike's point. And again, kind of overall Port Authority from Basil perspective. If this property stays commercial, it is, you can't have it both ways. You're not gonna be able to pick and choose what goes in there. So keep that in mind. Just recently, there was a study that was put out, I think it was Kansas City, Missouri, that said vape shops are moving in communities left and right. Is that one of the possible uses? Yeah. So we can't have it both ways. There's this option, then there's the other option, which brings up all kinds of mysterious questions.
Sure, you have something?
No, citizens want to talk again. I don't know if that's.
What? I'm sorry, yeah. Yeah, no, ma'am. No, ma'am, not at this point. No, ma'am. We're not gonna get into discussion between, sorry.
I just saw what you lost.
Yeah, so. At this time, I'm gonna move on to need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to approve ordinance 876, approving a request to rezone lot C2 of Pinehurst subdivision from CP2 General Business District to Planned Residential and approving the corresponding preliminary development plan subject to the conditions of approved outlined in such ordinance.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
A motion second, I'll call for a vote. Hayden?
Aye.
Vernon?
No.
Sherry?
No.
Ty?
Aye.
So that leaves it up to me and I vote no.
I'm sorry, Mayor, my name is Maria Garcia. I'm the city attorney. I do want to point out the requirements under the state statute for voting. So KSA 12-757 does provide the three options that Crystal and Leslie have provided you with earlier. In order to affirm this rezoning decision and approve the ordinance, it requires a simple majority of the council. That is a total of 3 people. The second option is to reject it or to deny it. That requires a 2/3 majority, which would be 4 people. And so with a vote of 2 to 1, that doesn't satisfy the requirements of the statute. And so the recommendation at this time is to either continue discussing and see if you all can reach that requisite amount either way, or perhaps remand it to the planning commission and have it returned to you at a later date.
Okay, I've been in the understanding that if it's a tie that I vote. So you're saying that I don't vote now?
So your vote for ordinances is important for the approval of an ordinance, and that's set by state statute. In this case, you voted no, but even so, the requirement under state statute requires there to be 4 votes for no. And so with your vote for no, that was a total of 3, not the requisite 4. And so the state's, right.
Of voting members.
So what is it you need me to do then?
Discuss further or see if we can get 2/3 to deny.
Okay, I'll open it back up for discussion.
I'll go ahead and start. I mean, I kind of talked about Port Authority. The one thing that I've always looked at, and I wrote this on my list. In 2009, 2012, during the planning commission, I know I looked at all kinds of proposals. You know, looked at them and studied them and did evaluate the impact it would have on the community. And then from 2012 to today, I've been in the city council. In all that time, I've been pretty consistent, extremely consistent with a statement that was made by a person that really got my thinking, and that is, once you get rid of commercial property, there's all kinds of pressure to get rid of commercial property. Once you get rid of commercial property, it's hard to get it back. So I've been extremely consistent with saying no to commercial property changes. Again, just kind of looking at, you know, the time that I spent in the city, going on almost 24 years now. I remember when 2440 was just dirt. There was no, malls or strip malls on either side of 2440. We had Casey's, Kelly's, and that was it. Another little store. But the point I'm making is that we do need to look at trying to retain or maintain as much as our commercial property as possible. But to Mike's point, we do need to figure out ways to, and that's my job for both the city and the county, to look for ways to bring economic development into Basel. What it's gonna look like, I don't know. But I do know this, you can't have it both ways. You know, whoever comes to us and say, we want to build here, we're gonna go through the same process that Crystal talked about. We're gonna evaluate it based on all the factors that we need to evaluate it, but those are the applicants. Mr. Riley and I have known each other for 10, 12, 15 years, but he also knows, where my heart is, he knows what my thought process is, and I'm just saying that it might seem like a simple decision, it's not.
And Vernon, you make a very valid point too. Once we lose commercial property, it's hard for us to get it back. And everybody in this town would love to see their taxes lowered. And how do we do that? By bringing different businesses in. And we're going to get more money out of, if we have businesses there than we would just an apartment complex. So Sherry, do you want to chime in on that?
Nope.
Okay.
If we're going down old times roads, my first house in this town 22 years ago was one of the apartments right next to the high school that I lived at for a year. And everybody knows the conditions of those. And then I moved my family of a 1, 2, and 3-year-old and my wife into a duplex right behind us, about a block, of which we've now lived at Falcon Lakes for 20 years. We would have not made the move to Pacer from Western Kansas. I was never going to be a Johnson County person without that opportunity to have a place for us to start with the young families. So I do believe in multifamily. I do believe in that opportunity. Have a little soft place in it for me. It's never in the right spot. This is our third one in 3 years. It's never in the right neighborhood or the right spot. So I do understand everybody's feelings. Someday I hope we find the right spot, because I do think there's a necessity and it does help grow and help bring people in. So that's just a little bit of my kind of background to match with Kelly's and Casey's.
You heard me make the statement about 4 to 5 miles. When I got my transfer orders from the Department of Justice to move to Kansas, this is where people told me to live. But that 4 to 5 mile comment caught me. Because the city was getting older and people were saying it's harder for us to get services. And the older senior citizens were talking about how difficult it was to drive. So that stays in the back of my mind. Because that would have been one of the homes that I would have ended up buying, was displacing them, but then you have to look at the fact that Baser is a community that is accustomed, to driving. But with all that being said, we still need to look at trying to get more services here in the city. And we do have far more services now than we did years ago.
Yeah, I think the 2-2 split is not surprising, right? I'm sure this was not an easy decision for any of us. I certainly struggled with it. I certainly understand and appreciate the concerns of the neighborhood, and was on the fence. I have gone back and forth a lot of different times in my thinking on this. The future land use map being recently discussed and analyzed by a lot of planning professionals, suggesting that this be multifamily residential, dense residential as a buffer zone was a factor. The Planning Commission's 5-2 recommendation was a factor, as it met the golden criteria. So if we remanded this back to the Planning Commission, I don't know what the guidance is, what more direction we would request from them to allow this type of project. And maybe this just isn't the right area, but based on future land use map and planning recommendation, this is what it would be.
And Madam Administrator, we're not looking at sending this back.
That's one of the options, since it did not pass.
So we need to vote again.
Yes, your options that are in front of you this evening to either affirm the Planning Commission's recommendation. The Planning Commission's recommendation, as Councilmember Maples pointed out on a 5-2 vote, was to recommend approval of the rezoning with certain stipulations. If the governing body wants to approve or uphold the Planning Commission's recommendations, you would do that with a simple majority vote of the City Council. If you want to overturn the decision of the Planning Commission, you need 4 votes from the council to do that. You need a super majority in order to do that, or a 2/3 majority. So that would be 4 votes to override or overturn the decision of the Planning Commission. If it is the City Council's desire to remand back to the Planning Commission, you would also need a majority vote to do that. And in order to remand something back to the Planning Commission, you are, by state statute, you are supposed to provide instruction on what it is that you're asking the Planning Commission to reconsider or to evaluate before they send it back to you.
So can I confirm, you said majority of the council, which I agree, I understood if it was simple majority, 2-2 tie, then the mayor votes to break that tie, but the 4 votes has to be without him included.
Right, it's the members elect And so we are calculating that as the 5 members elect. So in order to override, it takes 4 of the members of the council to reject the ordinance.
Because planning council approved it at a 5-2.
Well, the
Because they
planning,
approved
it just approved it, right?
Okay.
So if we're at an impasse. If we're at an impasse, but it continues to be 2-2, 2-2, 2-2. What happens then?
Well, we've discussed this, thought, maybe this might happen, and the recommendation that we have, guidance is either continue discussing it and see if any decisions or minds would be changed, or really to remand to the planning commission. That would take 3 votes to say we want to send this back with instructions on why this is getting sent back. At that point, the planning commission could revise it, and then it gets returned to the city council, which could then approve it by a simple majority vote again, and then also revise it, add something to it, etc. So it would bounce back to you eventually. So you would remand to planning commission, but then it would return to you, and hopefully with the clarification that you would be seeking.
So what happens if we go through all that process and it ends up being a 2-2 vote again?
I have not explored that potential, but I would.
I think everybody's pretty well set in their views, so again, I've always understood that, if there's a tie, I'm the deciding vote, but and neither that here or there, I don't think that we can send it back to the planning commission 10 times. I think it's going to come back to the council. It's going to be the same way. So, we need to know what's going to happen if that comes back again. And it's 2-2 again. I mean, if I don't have a deciding vote, I mean, why won't they just do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, no, I understand, Mayor. You do have a deciding vote in many matters, but the state statute is really clear that there have to be 4 votes. So even if you were able to vote no in this case, there's still only 3 no's, and the statute would require a 2/3 majority, which is 4.
If I would have voted yes, it would have passed them?
Yes, it would have passed because
It makes sense.
well, it does make sense,
Majority.
Mayor, because to affirm, I'm so sorry. The first option to affirm requires a simple majority, and that is 3 people. So a yes vote requires 3, a no vote requires 4, and that again is
That's
outlined in
a
the
state
statute.
statute.
Right.
These are state issues, not city issues, just to be clear. It's
406 or 405.
Right, but it's still, what the voting, whoever's voting, so being that recused himself is not involved anymore, so it's just 4, right?
You got to have 4 votes on 5.
Right. I guess no.
You said members elect. Can you clarify?
So it is the total number of council members that are on this governing body. Whether or not somebody has recused, the number is 5.
So if there was an additional recusal, it would be impossible to decline it.
And that's what happened last week then.
No,
This wasn't enough.
we didn't have enough to vote, but if somebody else recused themselves, if you're down to 3, you would not be able to get to 4 votes to deny it. Interesting. Sorry.
Yeah. So let me see. Let's see if I'm clear. Last week, I couldn't vote. This week, we vote. It's a tie. And these people took their time to come here to talk about what they're gonna talk about. And if we do this again in a week or 2 or whatever it is, they'll come back again. Okay, Mike, I'll let you talk. I'll let you talk.
I don't know if I can interject. I guess I'll go with Mike. I guess my question would be, because it has been asked of me in one of my neighborhood meetings. And my question to the commission is, the question that was asked at one of our neighborhood meetings was if it failed. I believe, and again, I'm not speaking for anybody, I believe there's a concern still about the CP2 zoning being in people's backyards. If there is not, then there is not. The question that was asked at the last meeting was, if this failed, would I come back with another multifamily project and engage the neighborhood more. My answer to that question was, it depends. If the council is against rezoning commercial to multifamily, then there's no point, right? I mean, there's no point in doing that. It's very easy for me to to keep this property commercial, start marketing it tomorrow, and have a commercial development come on this lot. That can happen. It is, the question was, and again, I'm asking because it was asked of me at one of my meetings. Is it the council's flavor that you are against turning this to multifamily because it's commercial? Then there's no reason for me to go reboot another project. However, if it's because of the project itself, because of the comments, then that's a different story. So I guess that's my question to the council, is if it's based off of turning from commercial to multifamily, which has been done, again, along this directly to the west on 2 lots, then there's no reason for me to move on. We'll just move forward with commercial development, and one of the 120 permitted uses can go on the site. And that's easily accomplished, at least from a development standpoint. So that's my question is, I don't want to belabor this back and forth 14 times. There's no point.
I agree.
If it is because it's commercial and you don't want commercial to go to multifamily, then that's the answer. We'll keep it commercial.
I'm just gonna speak for people that spoke tonight. I think that's what they're asking for. If they get a Wendy's in there or something like that there, that's the way it's gonna be, you know, and so I understand, and I think they all understand that's what they went to. They are not completely against multifamily. So, I mean, that's what I'm going. Yes.
Have a chance to speak because I want people online to be able to speak. So now I'll be quick.
Yes.
I know what's out.
No, that's fine.
Matthew McWilliams, my wife Jennifer McWilliams, we're at 830 Evergreen Streets. A little unique in the fact that our property, we don't have the map up here, but there's a nice little sewer storm drain that's down there that I've planted a nice pine tree next to for the last 6 years. Not a big deal, but what I'm getting at is the Credo Health Center, the Memory Center. We have spoken to, but I forget Bo's last name, is the CEO of the center. I have a difficult time, and I've spoken with Mike, been very professional this whole time about what's going in, what he wanted to do, you know, concerns the neighborhood, everything else. We try to be supportive. Our biggest concern is that the Memory Center, the retirement home owned by Credo, is a multifamily. Technically, it's a business. It's a hybrid of what I believe neighborhood wants. I was very accepting of what Bo, Ed, who's to the west of us, to the southwest of us, was also very accepting of what Bo had to present because it incorporated a buffer, almost like a home or residence would, of natural landscaping and everything else. Hopefully you guys were able to read my email that I sent to you. I think that's kind of a sticking point a lot for my wife and I and the neighbors is here is a residential designation or rezoning. That is not the same as 5 apartment complexes. I don't care how you cut it. It's just the way it is. And as I've said, I've spoken to Mike several times. My concern is with safety, separating a apartment complex from a residential area and from a retirement center and a community center that's giving treatment, memory treatment to older folks. So I understand where Mike is coming from and the fact that, hey, is this going to be rezoned? If not, I don't have a problem with rezoning it as long as we can find a compromise of a project. Granted, it's not my money.
1 minute remaining.
Not in your money, thank you. But if it needs to be rezoned to multi-residential, a family area, let's find a project that works similar to Credo, because that's a hybrid. The Memory Center is such a hybrid between a business, residential area,
and 5 apartment complexes with up to 200 people. And that's, like I said, I know where Mike's coming from with that aspect of, hey, I'm not gonna keep doing it. If it's gonna be commercial, I'll put it, get ready to go. Do we still want a multi-residential area as it's zoned as such? If he can find something else, if he wants to do something else, that's maybe like Credo, if you can find something like that, single level townhomes, whatever else, but let's not use the Credo businesses as residential because they're not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that's why I'm gonna open it back up to you guys and discuss amongst yourself what you want to do. I personally think I said everything that I'm going to say. I think I said everything I need to say. I think I presented, the information in terms of my strong belief and strong held belief that has been entrenched for the last 10 years. I don't see myself changing it. To your point, it's not about the apartments going there. And to Mike's point, Mike is just clearly economic. It's just, you've known me, I'm gonna say that. You've probably heard me say that before, Shay. But it's just pure, straight economics. If we want to have businesses here in Baszler, and that's one of the areas that we have identified as a commercial area, we're gonna give up that precious area for something other than what it was initially intended. So that's my point.
But we've recently re-identified it as an area for multifamily.
But it's still not zoned as that.
Right, per the comprehensive master plan, the 2040 plan.
Right.
That was one of the areas that was considered a change as a buffer space.
That's true. That's true. But until the zoning changes.
Agreed.
Still what it is. Sherry, do you have anything to add? Guy?
I think we're at an impasse. For everybody out there, I apologize. I'm probably not changing my vote. So I just kind of want that out there so we can decide what we do on an impasse position. If we're at 2-2 here. I don't know if that's answering Mike's question.
Yeah.
Mayor, I would advise that we take a 15-minute recess until it's 8:43 now. I would like to consult with the city attorney. We need to review some. It is very uncommon that you have a situation where you have a recusal and then you have a situation where after further deliberation, no one has changed substantively their opinion. So we need to have an opportunity to do some consulting.
We'll take a 15-minute recess and we'll be back. Sorry, guys.
Is a exec session?
No, it's not a Okay, we're back in session. So where are we standing?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I had an opportunity with the city administrator to consult the state statute again, as well as our local city ordinance, and have a further discussion about this. And the previous two recommendations that we had stand. The options at an impasse such as this are to either have votes change one way or the other, or to remand this back to the planning commission. A third option, which we are not at all, necessarily recommending, but it is a possibility, is for the applicant to withdraw the request. So that's really it. The state statute requires a decision to be made. We cannot leave it at a stalemate like this tonight.
So Mayor, our recommendation, if the body, it would be appropriate for you to see if there are any other motions that would like to be offered by the council. If there are any motions, you could certainly entertain those. If not, it is staff's recommendation that this item be remanded back to the planning commission, as you can't leave an item without resolution.
What would our recommendation to the planning commission be for them to reconsider at this point? For anybody? If we were to remand this back to the planning commission, what would we really be requesting of them to reconsider?
So if I could just provide a little bit of guidance.
Please do.
The state statute says that if the item is returned to the planning commission, that this governing body would need to provide a statement specifying the basis for the governing body's failure to approve or disapprove. So it's not necessarily a question for the planning commission. It's just specifying your reasons for being unable to reach a resolution.
Okay, so if it goes back to the planning commission and they come up with the same vote, then it comes back here. My point is, again, what happens if it's still a 2-2?
Mayor, I can tell you with a pretty good degree of confidence that this very rarely, if ever, happens. And really, in our research, in our consultation with the statutes and ordinances, the options that we have presented to you will be the same options next time if this comes back to the council.
Quick clarification point. And this is truly me having never heard any of this before, so just trying to understand that as the basis. If it would have been a 3-1 vote, yes, it would have been approved.
That's correct.
But to be denied, it would have needed to be 4-0.
4 of the council members,
And there's 4 of us.
right?
So either they change their votes completely, or they change their votes completely, or we're gonna be at stalemate for the next year.
That's correct.
Those are wonderful options. Thank you.
But one of the nice things about that is that, we're trying to do our best to represent the people that elected us. And some people elected us, from this perspective to look at things from this. I think I heard someone out there say, do you just do this? No, we evaluate, what's going on with the community. So, and with us being community members ourselves, we're gonna have different perspectives. Did I say this? Yeah, I'm gonna always be pro-business. I mean, almost, well, kind of always. I'm gonna always look at economic development as the number one option.
So I go back to my question. If Commissioner Fields, if you are no to going multi. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
Councilmember Sandberg, is that correct?
Yes, I'd like to leave it commercial
Like-
for commercial growth.
Mr. Mayor, is that your sentiment as well?
Yes, sir.
Then I would withdraw the petition.
I appreciate that very much. I think that was the only way to get over the impasse. Absolutely.
And
Appreciate your
we
understanding.
circle the wagon to go commercial.
Absolutely, Mike. I appreciate you doing that because I think these people are gonna be happy too. And
We'll see.
yeah, right, yeah. There you go.
I'm not trying to say that in a negative way.
No, I understand.
I'm just saying, no, I'm not. There are opportunities like these permitted uses. I'm not trying to be, that is just a reality.
And that's part of the painful thing.
That's Commissioner Fields, that's what you.
That's what I've been saying.
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am, no, you can call him later, please. Thank you.
We made our decisions. We appreciate it.
Has Mike withdrawn it?
Mike has withdrawn it, so it's a done deal.
Thank you.
It's not gonna be, apartment complex is not gonna be built.
So next topic, Mr. Mayor.
And thank you all again.
Mike, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you, thank you. All right, let's move on with this and do something else. We still got another hour of work.
Thank you, everybody. One of you want to give Ben.
Thank you.
One of you want to give Ben. Thanks, guys.
You got it. I was hoping for him.
I just hope he's not. I like her.
Mayor, if you don't find it, if you don't find it distracting, you must stand back in my spot.
Thank you, Chief.
And walk me to my door when I leave, to my car when I leave, please.
You want to explain to Ben what's going on?
No,
No, he recused, so I don't think he
Yeah.
matters to
Okay.
him.
and it took 2 hours and he's gotta have a good idea how fun it was.
Okay, we're still in the special meeting. Number 2, consider awarding the city hall construction project.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Staff provided you with an update on the City Hall construction project last week and the progress towards completing that. As you know, staff was excited and grateful to receive 4 bids on opening day on April 11th. There is a bid tabulation that's included with the packet this evening that shows each bidder their base bid, a list of 4 alternates, and the cost of adding or deducting them from the total cost, as well as the final bid for each. The lowest, most responsive bidder was Crossland Construction. And at this time, staff is actively negotiating a contract with Crossland and is excited to recommend proceeding with them for the construction of City Hall. Staff is also recommending acceptance of and approval of all of the alternates. That includes adding a standing seam roof, solar panels, and a wood metal ceiling. It also contemplates deducting the ephes facade, and staff would recommend brick rather than ephes. I did anticipate last week when I reported to you having a final agreement completed and negotiated by tonight. Our contract negotiations are ongoing, and I do want to note that Crossland has been extremely responsive throughout, these few weeks that we have been communicating with them. We just didn't quite meet the deadline for today, but we are working diligently to complete that as soon as possible. Tonight, rather than having the contract for you to consider, staff presents to you Resolution 2023-10, which authorizes the city administrator to enter into an agreement with Crossland Construction for the purpose of the City Hall construction project. That resolution has some requirements included in it. In particular, that the contract will need to be on a standardized form provided by the American Institute of Architects, also known as an AIA form. And that form is widely used across the United States by a number of entities for construction projects and is generally regarded as a good template. And so that's why we would want the resolution to state that. The resolution also requires that any revisions to the standard AIA template be negotiated by the parties, but meet the final approval of the city's legal counsel. And I do want to note that in August of 2022, last year, we had a similar resolution. It was an agreement between the city and Hafer Welker, where similarly, the contract was not completed by voting time. And this body approved or gave authorization for the city administrator to enter into a contract that was approved by the city attorney at that time. And I want to note for you all that Ryan Wacker from Crossland is appearing by Zoom this evening. Thank you very much for hanging on during that previous agenda item. I'm not sure if he wants to provide any comments, but I wanted to let you know that he's here in case you all have any questions for him. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for either one of them?
I'll just have a couple quick ones, and I first off appreciate Crossland for their bid. I know a lot of jobs they've done in town, very, very professional group. So speak highly of them. AIA is very standard. It's just a national form everybody uses. When it comes to the draw and draw process, will we be hiring an outside firm to review their construction draw and draw request? Will we handle that internally?
yes, we will be, and I'll let the city administrator expand on it.
Yes, so Hafer Walker will be assisting us partially on in that process. And then we also have contemplated as part of the agreement, also having special inspections for certain items as well.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Hayden?
That's very standard procedure as well. I just want to make sure it was following AIA also.
Yes.
No, you're done.
It sounds like we expect the conditions that are outlined in the resolution to be met. It's just a matter of timing.
That's exactly right.
Thank you.
No questions.
Sherry? No. Vernon? No. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution 2023-10, authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with Crossland Construction Company for the construction of the city of Baser's new city hall, subject to the provisions contained in the resolution.
Have a motion to hear a second?
I'll second. Third.
I'll take a vote. Vernon? Aye. Sherry?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Kai?
Aye.
Hayden?
Aye.
Passes 5-0.
On behalf of everyone that works in this very wonderful facility, we would like to sincerely thank this council for the opportunity. And we're very excited to work with Crossland. So thank you.
Okay. There's not a need for executive session, right?
There is not.
Then I will take a motion to adjourn out of the special meeting.
So moved.
Oh. Okay. I'll take a vote. Vernon? Aye. Sherry?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Todd?
Aye.
Hey,
Aye.
sorry. Okay, moving on to the work session,
Oh, shit, I just shut that.
the same members here. So number one, consideration of adopting an ordinance amending the city of Basel traffic schedule to permit the parking placement of no parking signs in Creek Ridge near Tomahawk Park, Landauer, north side, 156th Street.
Thank you, Mayor. Maddie Waldeck, Assistant City Administrator. Gene Miracle could not join us tonight, so I'm pitch hitting for him. Included in your packet for your feedback and consideration is an amended map versus what was presented last time. The last proposal was from on Landauer Street on the north side from 157th to 156th Street in its entirety. And we heard feedback that maybe that was too far. And so the proposal included is no parking along the north side of Landauer Street from Landauer Circle and then headed towards 156th Street and then turning on 156th Street to that first storm drain that you see there. And then also no parking permitted in the section that's in the lower right-hand corner. And then the possibility of 10 pull-in parking stalls right there that's marked in red. That would be on the newly accepted land donation from Creek Ridge Townhomes. I will say that I have spoken to two members of this community and they told me, and they were actually here tonight and I think they decided to go home. But they did tell me that they don't think that this is enough, that they think that they would like to see more no parking in that particular area. And they were not pleased with what was included in the packet. So I let them know that I would certainly relay their concerns to the governing body.
So they're wanting more?
Yes.
I spoke to them also.
Yes, yes, thank you.
I've been knowing these folks for 20-some years. They wanted more no parking signs on 156th Street. Jeff is a gentleman that was here and he's prone to falls. So I asked Jenny if she needed me to walk him out to the car. But she said that they couldn't get the ambulance down 156th Street to get to their house, which is right down by that big circle. And I was like, I didn't know there was a problem with getting the ambulance down 156th Street. I thought the problem was just right there where the kids are running across the street to get to the park. But they're wanting that whole 156th Street, one side, no parking. I don't think that was even discussed the very first time. They put right in.
Yes.
This was not even discussed this first. They want all that, no parking.
this was the stuff all the way over to here. And Jenny lived right there. That's when they couldn't get an ambulance in there. You know, from when Jeff fell. Well, you can get an ambulance. I don't know, maybe you can. But that's what they wanted, was that to be closed off. And I said that wasn't even part of our consideration. The consideration was because the kids running across that street, people parking and blocking that corner, it made visibility issues. So that made good sense to me logically to close that off. And then the other neighbors that I visit over there that have their walkout driveways, those folks are equally senior citizens, and they use wheelchairs and things of that nature to get up and down. So I didn't think that that would be fair to them, for them to have to give up their parking because we put a park someplace that is impacting, you know, their livelihood or their lifestyle. So that's what Jenny asked me to relay.
Yes, sir. I will say the parking situation on 156th Street, as I understand it from the community members, has been an ongoing issue. And so they were hoping that maybe this could be taken into consideration, but staff's recommendation is in red, and we would stand ready to receive your feedback on what you think would be the appropriate next steps.
If we're having legitimate issues with getting ambulances or fire trucks down 156th Street, I think we definitely need to consider what Vernon's stating. Do we go to the fire department? I mean, who is it that we would go to look into this, chief?
If I might weigh in on
Yeah,
this.
I'd love.
Kevin Self, we have had some issues, not park related. In fact, parking issues because of the school activities, right, the new fields.
Right.
We are currently addressing those from a law enforcement standpoint. I don't know that the park is generating as much traffic now as some assumptions are being made about it. But I think the parking that they're referring to was over the weekend, and there were some legitimate issues, and the police department educated the public about how and where to park. But it was school related, not park related.
Right. So everything I was hearing was that kids running to the park and not being able to see because of the parking. I think this right here will alleviate some of that because there's no parking over there. But the issue with emergency vehicles, that's my first time hearing about that tonight.
My first time as well.
At the last meeting, the fire department was present, and we did ask for their opinion on the curve. And we can certainly follow back up with them just to make sure that this would be an appropriate recommendation from their position as well.
When you say this, you mean just this from right here, not adding on?
But that would be at the discretion of the governing body. So whatever the direction is. Yes, sir.
I would also be interested in knowing street width, if there's space for a car parked on each side, plus then room left for emergency vehicles. But if not, then that's probably a concern in a lot of areas if there's no parking on one side of every street, and that's a significant change.
141st Street out by our area, we took parking off of one entire side. There was so much on both sides of the road that you had to really watch like who's going back and who's going which direction. So I think on most our city roads, with that much housing and people parking in the streets, there's going to be some issues.
Yeah. I agree. There's gonna be some issues, but right now, if we get these signs up, we don't have to look at kids darting between cars that's parked on the side. People that's coming around that corner should be able to see that there's somebody there, and the kids should not be darting because there's no cars there. So that to me is the biggest issue, is as they go from the north to the south to get to the park.
And then do we have a time frame for those 10 slots? I know it's still tentative potential, however we want to say it?
So we are still finalizing the land transaction with Creek Ridge. The governing body did take action to accept the donation. There's an issue with getting the documents that we were provided recorded. We actually need a different format from the homeowners association. So Maddie has been working diligently to try to get that resolved. Until we have title insurance and the ability to own it, we really can't install parking on that property. And as it relates to staff's recommendation, really this item came up or was originated to the city as a result of Tomahawk Park being constructed. There may or may not be other just parking issues related to the neighborhood and how that neighborhood was originally planned and constructed that the city has not been evaluating or exploring. We really we're focused on trying to alleviate a problem that was created based upon an improvement that we made and a benefit for the community. And we staff's recommendation is that we think this helps to alleviate what the city has helped to create.
Can this be on consent agenda without official language?
It could.
Okay, so my proposal would be that we put this on consent for the next meeting and then see if staff can communicate with fire, emergency, whoever we need to talk to make sure there is access, and if we need some additional signage that could be addressed later.
I agree.
This was signage
Or
that can be
support that.
addressed for that street or for 156?
156 if
Okay,
needed.
okay, all right.
Concur. Okay. Moving on, planning commission appointments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you are all aware, the planning commission is a 7-member board made up, is a 7-member board made up of appointed volunteers. The terms of the commissioners are 3 years each, and they're of course staggered so that we are not losing an entire commission all at once. Currently, the terms of Mr. John Gallion, who is our chairman, and Mr. Blake Waters are set to expire on May 31st. Both Mr. Waters and Mr. Gallion have expressed a desire to remain on the planning commission. We also have one vacancy. The mayor has recommended Ms. Janice Spillman to fill that vacant position. That term will expire in May of 2024. Staff is just bringing this to you for your consideration. Staff, of course, supports the mayor's recommendation that the members be reappointed and that Ms. Spillman be appointed to the board.
Any questions from anybody on that?
I appreciate those two. Can this be consent as well? Hoping the next meeting isn't this late.
Yeah, but Janice can be on the consent agenda too. Okay.
Appointments can be on the
All
consent
right.
agenda.
Item number 3, land bank appointments.
Thank you, Mayor. In 2021, the city of Basel adopted an ordinance to establish a land bank. Part of that, the requirement is to elect or nominate a board of trustees. The land bank board of trustees historically has been members of this governing body. And so as part of the annual process, we would request your consideration of reappointment. And we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have related to that item.
Anybody have any questions?
Can we do our annual meeting or like it's a break meeting?
I mean, shift this to align with election cycle a little better.
Well, don't we have, when's our upcoming?
Oh, the annual meeting of the board of trustees.
Yep, we were looking to schedule that within the next month or two, and maybe have it in conjunction with one of our standard meetings. Yes. Yes, thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Consent agenda, yes.
Let me go back and look at this. So the mayor does not automatically become the chairperson?
No,
Wow.
not of the Board of Trustees. If this governing body so chooses, then yes, that it could happen that way.
Would there be some job description? Because there's a place called treasurer. So people would know what they.
Yeah, we can certainly provide the language in the statutes about what those positions would be, so that the governing body had that information in advance of the annual meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is that it?
Yes.
Item number 4, PADM.
Ben said consent.
What?
Was
said
there a
consent on that
consensus
one.
for the consent agenda on this item?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Mayor.
PADM 002-23 zoning amendments, text amendments to the Baser zoning code, including Article 7, Section 3, C, Article 11, Section F3B, and Article 18, Section 18-.06.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a request from staff to amend our zoning code. As I think we all know, there are a couple of inconsistencies within our zoning code, some burdensome language. The first change to Article 7, that's the intensity of use regulations. Our code currently, this is for the R2 zoning district, so duplexes and townhome styles. Our current code requires 80 feet of road frontage for per lot. What often ends up happening is duplexes are built and then there is a desire to split the duplex down the middle, if you will. So that needs to become 2 separate lots. Under our current code, those would each need to have 80 feet of road frontage, which is pretty extensive. It's really quite a bit. But then also in Article 11 of our code, it says that those lots only need 20 feet of road frontage. So that's problematic. So your staff is recommending reducing that to 40 feet per unit. Also, slightly adjusting the minimum lot area requirement from 6,000 square feet to 5,000 square feet. This would allow for there to be 8 units per acre. Currently, our code allows for 7 units per acre, which is difficult to do when they're duplexes. So that's that section of it. Article 11 also provides for conditions that must be met for the duplexes to be divided. And staff is proposing to move those conditions from Article 11 to Article 7. So it's all in one neat uniform place. And then finally, Article 18, this has to do with the sign posting procedures for rezonings. The folks who were here recently know that our current code requires we place a sign 48 hours, within 48 hours of us receiving an application. However, it's very rare that we actually go to the very next planning commission. So then there's inaccurate information out there. And so we are proposing that the sign posting procedure become in alignment with what our notification process is, which is 20 days prior to the meeting. And our standard operating procedure going forward would be that notification is not made until applications are ready to go to planning commission. So not just received, but all of the additional, all the outstanding comments and review, everything has been done so that we won't be having to continue things regularly. The planning commission voted to accept these changes unanimously.
It all makes sense to me.
Yep. Anybody else have any questions?
No.
Consent agenda.
Consent agenda, everybody agree?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Item number 5, PADM 004-23 subdivision text amendment to the Baser subdivision regulations, chapter 2, section 2-102, 5, 1027, and 1036.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These changes are have to do with the plating procedures. I think we're all pretty familiar with this, so I won't belabor this point, but essentially what we're doing is we are making it clear in our code that the planning commission has full discretion in approving preliminary and final plats. Or removing the requirement for preliminary plats to come to the governing body. And we are also removing a requirement that the governing body have to approve a final plat before it can be recorded with the Register of Deeds. So that is in a nutshell what those changes are, to just bring all of this in alignment with the state statute that we're all very familiar with now. Again, the planning commission recommended this.
Anybody have any questions on this?
I appreciate that alignment after some of the previous meetings, and it helps remove some possible points of confusion.
Does everybody agree? We moved it to the consent agenda.
Consent. Yeah.
Okay. Consent agenda. Number 6, 2024 budget presentation.
Thank you, Mayor. As a follow-up to the governing body retreat, we have done some work on the budget, even though we've only had a week since the previous update. But we do have some updates for this governing body and we're eager to receive feedback. So we could go to the next slide. Before we get started, though, we do have an exciting announcement as it relates to Metro Green Trail. We were notified by the Mid-America Regional Council that 2 projects in that pool of funding were not able to move forward. And so there was $400,000 of available funds that 8 different projects were, for lack of a better term, because it's late, fighting for. And so Baser showed up and showed out. And so as a result, we go to the next slide, we received an additional $200,000. So even though we were one of 8, we did get half of the dollars. And so we're really excited about that. It was approved by an 8-2 vote after several votes that didn't approve. And so we will follow up with Mark once that's finalized. So exciting stuff. Next slide. Just as a reminder, this is the 2023 adopted budget. The funds are performing how we would expect them to in a positive cash position, and then strategically using down fund balance in the capital improvement fund. Next slide, please. Some highlights of the 2023 budget: a flat mill rate, Eco Devo resources, continuing our communication efforts, additional positions, replacing 3 police vehicles, and then our investments into the sewer system. Next slide. As we spoke about at the last meeting, we evaluated, thanks to Councilmember Stanford sending this information to us, how we compare against other cities, both within our class, and then I also did from the feedback that we received analysis of similar populations regardless of class. So just as a summary, and when we look at cities of the 3rd class, and there are 3 classes of cities, 1st class, 2nd class, and 3rd class. The city took formal action in 2022 to remain a city of the 3rd class. The average mill rate of those 503 cities is 48.795 mills. So we are well below that. When we rank them from highest mill rate to lowest, we are 339 out of 503. If we go to the next slide, I also took a look at cities with populations between 6,000 and 8,000, regardless of their class. There are 12 cities in the state of Kansas that have that population. The average city mill rate or the property tax rate is 44.022. When I rank them from highest to lowest, Baser ranks 10 out of 12. So that is really great news, and I think speaks to this governing body's ability to budget well and be prudent with the resources. Next slide. As a reminder of our timeline, we're here tonight and we'll have several opportunities for the public to come and provide input about the budget. And of course, this will be included in the Baser Quarterly and on the city's website. Next slide. I did some reworking to the priorities and from the notes that I took from the governing body retreat. Starting on the left, Baser is advancing trails and parks. Baser is a place where we take pride in our community and its safety. Baser is improving, modernizing, and maintaining roads. And then to the right, Baser is proposing no tax rate increase. Baser is a desirable place to live, work, and grow a business. Baser is continuing to promote fiscal transparency and stewardship. So I'll pause there to get feedback from the governing body. I hope this encapsulates the feedback that we received last week.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Good job,
Okay.
man.
Next slide. Just some of our standard budget presentation terminology. Ad valorem property tax is just the property tax that we collect on homes and businesses. The mill rate is the property tax rate. We did receive our preliminary evaluation. It is up 18%. We have not received the certified valuation yet from the county. I'd hoped to have that by tonight, but unfortunately, we have not received that yet. They are not behind schedule, but usually we receive that a little bit sooner than today. So 1 mill generates about $131,000, giving our assessed value. And then the tax levy is the revenue generated by applying the mill rate to the assessed value. Next slide. A reminder of our fund structure. We have our governmental activity funds, primarily funded by property tax, our capital funds funded by sales tax, enterprise funds are funded by the utility charges for those particular services. We have a few fiduciary funds that are held by the city but not controlled by the city, and then some special funds that are have some special restrictions of revenues and expenditures. Next slide.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we go back?
Yeah.
the capital project and equipment primarily funded by sales tax? Is there any property tax component in?
Capital improvement, no. Consolidated highway, no. Special alcohol, no. Yep, great question. Sorry, I had to go through my head there.
Good.
Just as a reminder on how property taxes are calculated on a home, we start with our appraised value that's set by the Leavenworth County appraiser times the assessment percentage. That assessment percentage is set in Kansas statute. For residential homes, it's 11.5%. For commercial properties, it's 25. That would give us our assessed value. We then take that times the mill rate, divide that by 1,000, and that would get our city portion of the tax bill. And just as a reminder for the public, that the mill rate that's highlighted in yellow is the only portion of this tax calculation that our governing body controls. Next slide. So in the city of Basel, as of last year, I would anticipate this to be a little bit higher. The average home was $325,000. If we do the math on that, the city portion of the property tax on an average home is $1,266. I have this on a future slide, but one of the things that I'm waiting for in the granular level data from the county is one of the things that we'll come back with is, what does that mean for a resident? If our assessed values are up 18%, what does that mean? And we've included that in previous budget presentations, and we expect to include that going forward. Next slide. Just a quick breakdown of the mill rate, 23 cents of every dollar that property tax paid goes to the city. The other remaining cents goes to other jurisdictions. Next slide. The draft budget model and the assumptions that are included, a flat mill rate. And we just included a note that that is 100% at the direction of the governing body, whether it stays flat or is reduced. We did a growth in expenses at an average of 3%, and we did right size each line item to make sure we weren't just applying a blanket 3% if it wasn't necessary. Advancing all the projects in the capital improvement plan, replacing 2 police vehicles, looking at contractual maintenance of trails and landscaping, the citizen satisfaction survey, doing a refresh of that, and then adjustments to the salary schedule. Next slide. So when we do a flat mill rate, this is the performance of the funds, and we have a note that the capital improvement fund, that negative number is intentional because we're spending down and doing projects and using a combination of bond proceeds and fund balance and the budget dollars allocated. Next slide. One of the things that I took notes on from the council, from the governing body retreat, was the gap of the year 2 of the street improvements. So if the year 2 street improvements calls for $1,832,000 of improvements. The budget is $463,000. So a gap of 1.3, almost 1.4 million. And so there's definitely a need there. There are some funds, the general fund, the consolidated highway fund, are projected to have some larger fund balances at the end of the year. And so we could look at maybe allocating some of those dollars towards that gap as well. Next slide. So at the next meeting on June 14th, we will have our certified valuation of the city. We'll have the breakdown of the growth. We'll have what percentage is new development and what percentage is just appreciation of our existing homes and businesses. And then we'll have that information about the financial impact of residents and business owners. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Maddie?
Awesome job.
No,
Great
well,
speed
yeah.
flying through that. Yeah.
Thank you for going quickly.
My only thought, we talked about it some last time. I think flat makes sense given the information we have now. Hopefully we get some news later in the summer that allows us to consider a reduction.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 7, external audit, BT and Company, special meeting request.
Thank you, Mayor. We are in the thick of our audit, and we are required to file that audit with our continuing disclosures every year on June 30th. Our regular meeting is scheduled for June 28th, just how it falls on the calendar this year. We think that 2 days is just not enough runway. We really want to be on the safe side to make sure that all our filings happen in an appropriate amount of time. And so we're asking that in advance of the work session on June 14th, if the governing body would approve us to hold a special meeting to hear the audit report and then also take formal action to accept if the governing body so chooses. So we would appreciate your consideration and feedback on that item.
Yep. With that. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Fine.
I'm good. I'm just looking at my calendar to make sure.
Right. I appreciate that. And with the approval, do we have approval to affix your electronic signatures for proper notifications?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item number 8, discussion of whether to adjust the governing body meeting start time.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. This agenda item is really purely to gauge council interest in adjusting the meeting start times for your city council meetings. In staff's research, obviously, the city of Basel has an ordinance that establishes meeting times to begin at 7:00 p.m. The earliest ordinance that we could find is from 1979, establishing that time. So 7:00 has been the time for decades now, and it might be time, this is the point of the discussion, whether there's any interest in adjusting it to an earlier time, potentially appropriate or applicable now, given that Basel is growing, the number of items that come before the council and extend the meeting into the late hours of the night. With the packet, staff has provided a chart that provides the meeting start times for various other cities around us. The majority of them do begin at 7:00, but there are some that begin sooner than that, 6:00. For example, Lawrence starts at 5:45 and then Wichita in the early morning. So with that, I do want to say we don't necessarily have a recommendation from staff. We wanted to hear any of your input, and then if directed, we could return with an ordinance amending the current language.
I don't know that it's fair to have this tonight.
Yeah, what generated this discussion point in the first place?
It was staff generated based upon the meetings that this council has been having just recently in recent months.
To me, it looks like we're more the outlier in only having one official meeting, and we now just approved our third straight work session to have a special meeting ahead of it. Would we be better served having 2 official meetings and then adding a work session if it was appropriate?
That's a potential, certainly.
I would not want, I don't mind if we go earlier. I would not want before 6:00.
Agreed.
Just for work schedule reasons, it could be difficult.
I agree with that. 6:00 is probably about the earliest I'd be able to do it.
I mean, I'd be glad to go to 6, doesn't make a difference. 6
Yeah.
or 7.
So let me make sure I'm hearing this right. Have a regular session twice.
That was my suggestion,
Okay.
not related to what they had proposed.
And then the other piece would be a regular session twice and then a work session someplace in between there.
I mean, that's a possibility. We could also just have a standing work session that is attached to the regular session. There are other communities that do that they will open a regular session and then close that, whatever needs to be voted upon, and then they'll open a work session after that. So it's attached to the same meeting and it's just standard rather than having to ask for a special meeting and applying electronic signatures.
Right. My thought was we've done that 3 times in a row now, so just make that the norm. Saves the administrative staff potentially still just 2 meetings a month, but
Right.
able to take formal action at both.
But why do we have that though? We had that situation just recently. Because of what reason? And whatever those reasons are, whatever that reason was, is that reason going to continue to surface over and over again? And one of the reasons was we didn't have enough people for a quorum. Quorum. So if we have 2 meetings a month and we don't have enough people for a quorum, then we scheduled a special meeting because we needed to make up for that. So if it's just that kind of thing, then our regular meetings are working just fine. We're getting things done.
I have no opinion on that piece, but I'd be willing to go to 6:00 if people want to start early.
6:00's fine with me, and I would also be okay with 2 regular meetings and a work session that's like today. Because I don't know if that helps staff to actually get more work done in a month, where you're not waiting 4 weeks at a time. You can do work 2 weeks at a time.
Yes, I
And
think
I could
that
see as the city grows that would be a valuable thing for staff. And also for just businesses that might want to come to town. They're not waiting and waiting and waiting. So I'm okay with 6:00, and I'm also okay with what Hayden had mentioned.
Me
You
too.
know, two regulars and tack a work session on behind one of them.
So how many meetings can a council member miss in a row before issues start popping up? It used to be, you could be gone for like 6 weeks at a time.
Well, I thought it was 6 per year.
No.
Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I can get back with you at the
Okay.
next meeting. If there's a rule written somewhere, I can
Okay.
report back.
Well, years ago, that's the way it was explained to me. Because I would explain, if I'm going to Maine and I'm driving to Maine, I know I'm gonna be gone for 6 weeks. So I miss one meeting. I'll miss one meeting. I won't miss two. But in this scenario, that's in the potential scenario of there being 2 meetings a month, I'm gonna miss 4.
I'll just add to that. I completely understand if there is a vacation and a council member is not available, but the Open Meetings Act does permit council members to Zoom in or phone in. So even though a member might not physically be here, there's always the option to
Thank you, Maria.
use
But
technology. But I understand vacations, some people want to completely step away.
when you're 60 miles from the Canadian border and there's more deer and elk out there and moose out there than there are people, those things just do not exist. So I do understand that and I do try, but there's gotta be, we gotta go back and look at those, you know, how that's gonna impact. And I, again, was told years ago, that's why my trips to Maine are about 6 weeks. I get out there.
Would it help the city? Would it help the staff if you guys had stuff to take action on every 2 weeks?
And even consent agenda type items, right? If there's a large item we want to try to time based on availability, I think that's an option too.
I mean, I would just say from my perspective, yes, we have a number of items that we try to time in accordance with that fourth Wednesday of the month. And it, you know, there are times where it probably slows applicants or just a business down in general. So but I definitely appreciate the value that work sessions bring. They tend to be a little more participatory in terms of discussion. The discussions are more robust. And so I think as I think someone suggested, having a regular meeting and then immediately adjourning into the work session is also a good practice. And as to the start times, we just recognize, I think staff has observed that after about 9 p.m., eyes have glossed over.
Say again.
So we thought this might be timely to ask the city council and mayor if you wanted to consider an earlier start time. And again, your staff is happy to support you in whatever way you want. We're not recommending that you adjust the start time, but if that helps accommodate, several of you are still working regular full-time jobs and, you know, staying up and alert until 10 or 11 p.m. and then go home. That is not always maybe the most conducive for your next day.
Just in regards to process again, so I'm in support of the 6 o'clock, moving it to 6 o'clock. So we would inevitably have regular meeting first, vote. And then we would go to work session for the next meeting that we would be discussing and voting on in 2 weeks. So it'd just be back to back.
Yes.
Okay.
So we would adjust the cadence of how we structure items. If we had 2 regular voting meetings, you know, our practice has been work session, then it goes on to the next meeting. Well, this just gives us an opportunity to add more items to work sessions that would then get on to the next 2-week rotation.
I'm good with that. I would give it a try. We can always say.
It helps you guys to be more efficient. I love it. Yeah.
My biggest complaint I probably hear from business people and stuff is the amount of time it takes.
Mhm.
And that's, a lot of that's on us
Yeah.
because it's, oh, we need to wait them.
Yeah.
It takes a month or maybe 2 months to get through planning, which is then when it comes to our work session, which is another month later. So when you only vote once a month, you can delay things pretty easily.
Mhm.
So that might help.
Okay, well, thank you for this discussion. It's helpful. Just so I'm clear on it, we are, staff is going to return with an ordinance amending the start time for meetings to 6 o'clock p.m. There will remain only 2 meetings per month, but with the first meeting of the month which has traditionally been a work session, it will now begin with a regular session and then close and start with a work session. Is that correct? Okay.
And then we will explore the question that Councilmember Phillips asked regarding number of missed meetings.
Yeah, because unfortunately, my family is first Florida and Maine. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
And my wife does not fly,
Oh,
just for the record. Okay, moving on. I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And seconds. Everybody in favor, say aye.
I
aye.
Okay, Leslie, I got my calendar